companies use defensive strategy to deal with competitive attacks. Expert Marketer magazine named this book the book of the year, the marketing book of the year. Earlier, Tim wrote Breakthrough Marketing Plans, which is probably a work that most of us or many of us are acquainted with. Uh, Tim, again, very interestingly, Tim is an expert on Super Bowl advertising. He created the Kellogg Super Bowl Advertising Review in 2005 and has led the event ever since. Over the past 10 years, the program has generated more than 5 billion media impressions. He has served as a judge for the ANA Genius Awards, the Word of Mouth Marketing Association's WAMI Awards, the Native Creatives Awards, and the Ethic Mark Awards. So Tim, of course, Tim is not related, only to the academic sphere. Beyond that, Tim works with major corporations around the world on strategy and branding issues. His recent clients include Eli Lilly, Medtronic, AB InBev, and AbbVie. He's president of Class 5 Consulting, a market strategy firm. Of course, someone of the stature of Tim would be frequently cited by the media. He's been quoted in publications including Business Week, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. And he has appeared on all of the major television networks. He serves on the board of the Alliance Francoise de Chicago and completed 2 terms on the board of the Lycée Francois, Chicago's French international school. In his earlier days, Tim began his career at the consulting firm Booz Allen and Hamilton, where he worked on strategy products. He joined the marketing team at Kraft Foods in 1991. During his almost 11 years at Kraft, he led brands including Miracle Whip, Taco Bell, Parquet, and Gigonio. He was responsible for the launch of more than 24 products. Tim received his BA from Yale and his MBA from Harvard. So without further ado, Tim, I would hand it over to you. As you all know, again, the topic is who can you trust? Branding and trust in a post-COVID world. Tim, I hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you. And it is such a pleasure to be part of this conference. And, this is amazing how the new technology works. So this is my classroom, and I have a class coming up in just a little bit. And I'm so happy it worked out that I could join the conference before that to spend a little bit of time here before I get on with teaching here at Northwestern at Kellogg. So today, though, I want to talk today about branding. And in particular, I want to talk about trust and what happens and what's ahead of us in a post-COVID world. I'm not sure we're there yet, to be honest. I don't think we're post-COVID yet. I think many parts of the world, we're all battling this and we're all in the middle of it. But in due course, we will get through the COVID crisis. And then the question is, what does it mean for all of us as brand builders? And I want to talk about that and what it means for brands, in particular, what it means for brands relative to trust and how trust and branding will play a role in this post-COVID world. So that's the goal, is highlighting really the role of brands and the importance of brands in this world where we will soon, I hope, find ourselves. And that's the topic for today. So I want to give you a very quick assessment and take you through sort of some thoughts on it. And then we'll have a little bit of time for some questions, if you have any, around branding or really any topic. And then we'll be on to the next part of the conference. So let me start with really 3 things to talk about today. Number 1, COVID and trust. And I think it's interesting to reflect on what's happening to trust in the world that we live in with COVID. Then I want to talk about the role of brands and how brands fit into this world that we are all living through and living in. And then I want to think about implications for brand builders. And if I have time, I'm going to show you sort of a new piece of branding that just came out recently that I thought was an interesting look at branding in this new world. COVID and trust. So the reality is that whether we like it or not, we live in a world where trust is becoming very hard to find. And I think in the world right now, and it doesn't matter really what country you go to or where you go, what we're seeing and what we will see is a real decline in levels of trust in the institutions in which we live our lives. We will see a decline in trust in governments, in social institutions, in educational institutions. I'm sorry to say, in lots of places, we will see trust get badder. Why is that? Well, the reality is that trust has been declining for many years. And if you look around the world and you track levels of trust, in many places you will see a decline in levels of trust. This was a study that was done. So here in this country, in the US, but I thought this was amazing, right? So this is a study that looks at the percent of people in the US who trust the government always or most of the time. And if you look back at it, the levels of trust used to be quite high in government. We were up at 80% back in the 60s. And knowing, by the way, what was happening in the 60s in the US, that's pretty amazing. But then it began to decline, and in the 70s it declined, and in the 80s it declined, and it went up and down a little bit. But as we've gotten into the recent decades and recent years, it's fallen to new lows. There's new levels of skepticism out there, and people have lost trust. One of the things I think that is feeding this lack of trust all over the world is social media. You know, social media has become such a part of our lives, and people spend all their day, sometimes it seems, on Facebook, on Twitter, on all the social media things. But what people have learned about social media is that you cannot trust social media. And people have developed an incredible skepticism and doubt about social media. So again, here's, I thought, another very interesting, this from Pew Research, a study. They looked at people and they said, you know, what do you trust when it comes to social media? And what's amazing is that the levels of trust are remarkably low. I mean, you look at levels of trust. You take YouTube. You know, only 17% of people trust what they see on YouTube, which is sort of amazing. You can watch a video and you don't trust it, and 36% of people don't trust it. You go to Facebook. Facebook is sort of amazing. Facebook, you've got 15% of people who trust Facebook. 59% of people, they don't trust it. They don't trust it. And by the way, the reason people don't trust it is because they've learned that they can't trust it. You know, I think humans, we all want to trust naturally. We want to believe in the world around us. We want to believe in the things we see and in the things that exist in our world. But we've learned to be skeptical, and we've learned to doubt things. And we've learned that you can't always believe what you see. And we're learning now to doubt. And the thing that's really, I think, concerning to me in some ways is that COVID is damaging trust to an astonishing degree. And this is a trend that I think is just emerging. But one of the impacts of COVID is that I think levels of trust will fall now in a lot of the institutions that we would like to believe in. You know, what's happening with COVID is that people are really looking for answers. You know, I think all of us around the world, and I think it's true in India, and it's true certainly in the US and in Europe, is that we all want to know when this is going to be over. And we want to know how we prevent COVID. And we really want to know, how is it transmitted, and where does it exist, and how do we take care of it? And the reality is, we just don't know. We just don't know a lot of these things. And so what happens is that the people we look to, they're not providing us with the answers that we want to see. Or they're certainly not providing answers that we would consider trustworthy or that are credible. And since we don't know, what's happening in many places is that people are giving us answers, right? And yet they're wrong. And they're wrong answers. And so if you trusted these folks before, now you have clear evidence not to trust them in the future. So I think what's happening now is that COVID is really causing people to question and doubt what they see all around them. And some of this has really been highlighted because global leaders, a few global leaders in particular, have really given people just some terrible, terrible advice when it comes to COVID. Here's just a couple. Let me show you a couple examples. So here is, let me start with Boris Johnson from the UK. And here's Boris Johnson giving us some advice on COVID. And this was from back in March. But this is Boris. We'll take a look at this.
I'm shaking hands because I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. You'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And I think it's very important that we, people obviously can make up their own minds. I think that Matt has said that people must make up their own minds, but I think the scientific evidence is, well, I'll hand over to the experts, but our judgment is wash. Washing your hands is the crucial thing. Yes.
All right, there you go. There's Boris Johnson. And if there's one thing we now know, that is terrible advice. He's off shaking hands with everybody, shaking hands with COVID patients. No, that is just wrong. I'm sorry. That's just totally wrong, right? And then, of course, he gets COVID, and that's just totally wrong. And I would like to say that here in the U.S., we have a lot of credibility in our government, but that's not the case either. Here's Donald Trump. You might have seen this clip, but this one's one of my favorites.
Thank you very much. So I'll ask you a question that probably some of you are thinking of if you're totally into that world, which I find to be very interesting. So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right. And then I see the disinfectant, but knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. So we'll see. But the whole concept of the light, the way it kills it in 1 minute, that's pretty powerful.
Right. Yeah. Now, that also, by the way, to be clear, terrible advice. You're not going to take a bright light and bring it inside the body. You're not going to inject disinfectants into the body. No, this is just lunacy, right? So if you ever were tempted to trust our political leaders, I would suggest perhaps that's not a good idea. And what we've seen now is that this is happening all over the world. And by the way, it's not because I think these are bad people. It's just because we don't know. And so people are giving answers, but the answers are clearly wrong. What it's doing, though, is it's raising levels of distrust, and people are losing faith. They're losing confidence in the things around them. And I think it's going to linger. One of the things that's very clear, they've done research on this to understand what's the long-term impact of pandemics and disruptions in your life. And what they find is that these disruptions, they linger. It's not that we're going to get through the virus and all of a sudden we'll be back to believing things. No, it's not how it goes. There's a whole generation of people who are growing up with the virus. We're all living through this, and it will affect us and affect levels of distrust for many, many years to come. And so this is something we're going to be working through and dealing with then for a very long time. What does all of this mean for brands, though? Well, I think for brands, this is actually incredibly, incredibly important, right? In a world where trust is scarce, then brands play a really unique role. So brands are associations, they're all the associations linked to a name, mark, or symbol associated with a product or service. But trust is really a core part of a successful brand. And when you think about great brands, the one thing they embody is there's a level of trust in the brand. I mean, you look at a brand like Apple, and really all over the world, right? Apple is a brand that people believe in and they trust, right? When you look to Apple, what do people think about? They think about innovation. They think about creativity. Maybe they think about Steve Jobs. They think about maybe California and innovation and iPhones and all these wonderful things. But there's a level of trust in what Apple stands for. Or you take a brand like Nike, and it's the same thing. Nike stands for a set of values and a set of associations that are enduring and they are true. And at the moment, where people seem to be trusting is they trust brands. We may doubt our medical institutions, we may doubt our political leaders, and yet people still trust Nike and they still trust Apple. And when you look at all the great brands around the world, the thing that every one of them brings is a level of trust. I mean, you look at Tiffany. If you go to Tiffany to buy diamonds, to buy jewelry, there's trust. And you buy that diamond or the jewelry with a level of trust in what you're buying and the people that are there and the people that will stand behind it. And I think that's true if you go to Danone, it's certainly a wonderful French brand, or you go to Tata, or you go to Emirates, or FedEx, or pick your brand. But the thing that's true about brands is there's a level of trust. And in this world, this COVID world, brands seem to be holding up much better than really anything else when it comes to trust. And so there's this wonderful opportunity now to think about brands playing this role in our life that is at a level of importance that is far beyond what we know. By the way, it's not just about money and business. What we also know from research is that people, we all want to trust. We do. And the key to happiness in life is to be able to trust the things around you. And what they find is that if you cannot trust, it leads to levels of anxiety, depression, right? Uncertainty in your life. So brands, in a way, play this role in the world that right now is so important, because not only do brands drive great businesses, but also I think they're important for people all over the world, because in a world that's uncertain, they give us things to believe in and things to trust. What does all this mean for us as brand builders? Well, I think there's a few implications here. So number one, I think it's just understanding and realizing how important brands are right now. Brands are not becoming less important. They're becoming much more important than I think they ever have. And brands are becoming more and more unique. You know, the key to a great brand, you have to be different somehow. You've got to be different and unique. Trust is such a core part of branding. And so what's going to happen is I think the brands people trust, the brands people really believe in, are going to take on much more value in the years to come. And they're going to become more significant in people's lives. And as trust falls away, those few things we believe in are going to emerge as really important things in our life. The three implications. Number one, what this all means is that we really have to invest in brand building. This is the time to step up, to really focus on building your brand in an organization. You want to make sure that you have a level of trust with your customers. You want to make sure that you are reinforcing all the associations you have. That's going to drive the growth for you in the long-term world. Now is the time for brand building. You know, many companies, I think, are tempted now to cut their marketing spending, to cut their brand building. That's exactly the wrong thing to be doing right now. You want to keep investing in the brand. You want to hang in there. Second thing, you want to narrow your focus. I think for brands right now, it's really important to do a few things really well and to do things that you can execute on consistently and that are going to reinforce the trust that you have in your brand. And you want to invest in that, and you want to narrow the focus, and you really want a tight definition. You want to be who you are, and you want to be that as purely and as intensely as you can. And then I think it is so important right now for companies to engage the organization. You know, brands are really brought to life by all the people who work for and with the brand. The key, though, is that for the level of trust to remain and build, you need everybody working together every day to reinforce the brand, which means, though, that as a company leader, now's the time to really reach out to make sure that people are engaged, that they're feeling part of the brand, that they're proud of the brand, and that they're working every day to do the right things and to live up to trust and to make it right when brands stumble. You know, brands are not perfect. They will always stumble, but it's what we do when we stumble that really affects and tells people whether they at the core can really trust us and really believe in us. So I'd like to show you now, if I have time. Oh, good, I do. I want to show you now just a piece of marketing that I saw recently that came out here in Chicago. And I thought it was a really interesting piece of brand building. And I want to talk to you about why I think it's a great piece of brand building and why it makes sense in a COVID type world. So let me show you this. This is for, just to be clear, a hospital here in Chicago. Just started recently. It's an interesting spot. It's one that's worth thinking about, actually. But let me show it to you, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it and why I think it is such an interesting piece of marketing. All right, so let me go ahead and run this. Right. Yeah, there you go. Right. What an astonishing, I think it's astonishing piece of advertising, right? So emotional, so really edgy. But what I like about that, there's a couple things. Number one, clearly this is a hospital that's investing in their brand and they're building their brand. And now is the time to do that. Now is the moment to make a big move to invest in your brand. Also, though, they're doing in a way that is very intense, very real, and I think that's a message. That's a way to break through. Also, it is taking a stand. You know, why do you go to this hospital? Well, you don't go there for the warmth. You don't go there for the comforting care. You don't go there for the pleasant people. No, you go there because these people, they are tough. They are going to fight. They are aggressive. They are out there intensely working to try to battle diseases. This is like a military operation, but it's taking a stand. It's differentiating. It's being unique. That's the sort of stuff that's going to work, I think, in the world today, because that's what people are going to reach for as we go forward. People are going to look for brands they can trust, brands that stand for something, brands that invest in their business. And so my hope is that you'll be able to build great brands in this new world, and that as we get to the post-COVID world, we'll be able to get to that space where we really do build great brands, which drive great results for us, but also play an important role in people's lives. So let me put up my contact information. So there's my contact info. There's the email. I have a blog that I post on occasion. There's Twitter if you do Twitter, as well as some of the books that I've got out there. But we've got, I think, just a couple minutes for a couple questions if we have questions. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. All right.
Professor Calkins, that was
Yes.
a fabulous, address. I personally found it very engaging. I've been a fan of your work, and thank you very much again on behalf of CII for joining us. I'm sure that many members of the audience who have questions, they will be sharing them with you over mail. If you do have time, we'd love to hear from you as well, sir.
Of course, yeah. If you've got a couple of questions, I'd be happy to take them. I think we've got just a little bit of time until our session winds up. But if we've got time, I'm happy to take them for sure.
So one of the questions that we had actually received was, you mentioned a lot about the critical element of trust eroding in current times. So, due to the COVID pandemic. And on the other side of the coin, many brands are actually looking at how to leverage trust as a competitive differentiator. So what are your thoughts on that? How can brands actually use trust? Though you've highlighted that in your talk, but if you have any specific examples in the US or around the world as to how that has been done so far.
Well, I think the important thing, especially as we go through the pandemic, I think it's really important for brand leaders to be as transparent as possible about what's happening with the business and what's happening with the outlook. One of the things in the U.S., and I don't know if it's true in India or in other countries, is that, it's interesting. We've had a lot of scarcity on products. So we've run out of toilet paper and we've run out of yeast for baking bread, and flour's been out, and it's been very hard, and wipes, and we've run out of a lot of products. The key there, though, and what I think the strongest brands have done is they've been very transparent about it. They've said, I know we're short on product right now, but we're working very hard to get there. You're going to see it's going to be coming. It's going to take us time. But they were open. They were honest. They were true. And I think that's the sort of thing that builds trust. When it comes to trust, it's not about saying things are perfect. I think it's about being open and transparent. And what I think the strongest brands are doing is they're really working with that with their customers. I think customers at the core are pretty forgiving. And when you explain what's happening, they'll forgive you. But if you try to say everything's fine, it's not fine in many cases, and it just erodes trust in a very subtle way. So honesty, transparency, I think, are really the key of the brands that are most effectively responding to this.
Professor, if I might put in another question, and this is a pretty popular one. So there was always the problem of fake news and misinformation on social media. So that has sort of amplified when it comes specifically to hospitality brands and with consumers actually when the unlock is happening and them trying to go out and to eateries, restaurants, hotels. How can brands actually overcome this? If you have any insight as to how can they directly reach through to the consumer, to settle the trust question.
Well, I think it is so hard right now because one of the things that's true, especially when you look at hospitality, is that so much of what you see online is just not true. So I just went to a talk here at Kellogg the other day, and I listened to someone who was analyzing fake reviews. You know, we look at all the reviews online. What is astonishing is the number of fake reviews and the percentage of the reviews that you see on these sites, whether it's Amazon reviews or whether it's reviews on TripAdvisor. You know, they're all fake. You know, they're not real actually. And so I think the key is for companies is two things. One, you want to make sure that you're out there and that you have a voice, and that your website, for example, is a source of truth and of honesty, and you need to be out there. The other piece is that I think there's a real role for advertising in the world today. You know, more and more people are saying we don't need advertising. We can just use social media. And that's true. The problem is, though, that social media is this world of distrust. And I think advertising can play a role to offset some of the distrust, because you need to be out there and you need to be part of the discussion and you need to be putting out what is true about your brand. Otherwise, it gets eroded because people just say false things, fake news that really is sadly part of our life.
Professor, time for one last question, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. So, so with social distancing, there's perhaps a greater reliance on conversational tools, and chatbots to interact with consumers. Isn't the element of personalized communication and quality of service lost in the process? And how can brands actually communicate the element of trust through automated communication formats rather than in person?
So I think done well, online impersonal communication can be really, really effective if it's done well. Because, one of the biggest things is that, we can actually address people's needs. And what customers are really looking for, in many cases, when they reach out to a company, they want to see their issue addressed. And that's the most important thing. And these non-personal points of contact give us a way to do that effectively and quickly. And I think if we do that, we build a huge level of trust that is out there. The other piece is that certainly automation and AI are wonderful tools to help us more efficiently do that. The only issue is, and the caveat I would say is, there's a huge difference between doing it well and doing it poorly. And I think there's nothing that erodes trust more quickly than automation done poorly. And there's nothing that can help you more than automation done well. So you really have to think about, as a brand, how do you make sure that to the extent you move that way and you automate more and more of your customer service, you want to make sure that you're only doing it to the extent that you're really confident it's being done well and reinforcing your brand. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you'll erode out that point of contact. There's nothing worse than when you reach out to someone and you have a sense it's a person, and then you realize it's not a person. It's just a computer responding to you. And they're not even responding very well. And you lose a little bit of trust in the brand then. And I think that erodes what we're looking for. Really important right now in a world where trust is so significant.
Thank you very much, Professor Hopkins. Wonderful insights as always.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Wonderful for us. Great privilege. Please stay safe. We look forward to meeting you in a future forum as well.
Absolutely, and hopefully we can do this in person one day, not too soon.
Why not? Of course.
Not too long. There you go. Very nice. Have a great rest of the day. All right. Bye bye. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Oh yeah, there you go. That was a talk I was doing over in India. I don't know about that. Oh no, thank you for not jumping in. I gotta run up and get one of my speakers down here. I gotta go get them. All right, got time.